both in terms of number of institutions and number of students studying in these institutions by the private sector. I'm not saying it's a good thing. What I really want to say is that this has resulted in significant consequences for the sector itself. We need to create a better ecosystem in which private, not-for-profit type elements in the higher education sector come in. That's one of the 10-point agenda, but it requires a better understanding of the role of the private sector in higher education. The fourth, I think it's very important, is that we really need to address the issue of jobs. I think the question of jobs is at the heart and center of higher education. The aspiration of young people who go into universities is a very serious issue. You have a situation where over 60 to 70% of our engineers are unemployed. There are numerous engineering colleges and management colleges and other colleges getting closed across the country. The aspiration of Indian students to be able to receive good quality education and then get a job is being affected. So jobs and careers are at the heart and center of the higher education problem. And that also is connected with our aspiration to build a $5 trillion economy, because we need to invest in entrepreneurship, we need to invest in social innovation, we need to invest, as the government talks about, startups and the ecosystem for development of startups. But honestly, this can happen only in higher education institutions themselves. Despite the best of intentions, both corporations as well as government agencies are not suitable to create this environment. It has to be created within academic institutions, higher education institutions, colleges across the country, as well as universities, and we need to play a leadership role there. And lastly, one of the things that we need to recognize is the role of higher education and universities in the larger, agenda of nation building. In this case, we should mention that universities have to play a leadership role, not only in building a $5 trillion economy, and I strongly believe we simply cannot build that economy without significantly investing in higher education, but we also need to recognize the role played by universities in issues addressing humanities and social sciences. I've always been concerned by the fact that many of India's higher education imagination has been largely focused on STEM and to some extent in medicine, but we have to a large extent neglected the importance of humanities and social sciences. The new education policy has started. We need to invest in aspects of developing the higher education sector with a stronger focus on humanities and social sciences, and that is something which we hope we can see in the future. So these are some of the things which I want to share with you. I'll be happy to take questions, but before I do that, I would like to introduce my colleague, Professor Tom Goldstein. Tom Goldstein is the Dean of the Jindal School of Journalism and Communication. He was before the Dean of the Columbia School of Journalism, which is in New York, and also the Dean of the University of California, Berkeley School of Journalism. Quite remarkably, he was member of the Pulitzer Prize Board, which is like the Nobel Prize for journalists and the media. He served as a member of the Pulitzer Prize Board. He used to work for New York Times and Wall Street Journal. There are very few people like him in the world who have straddled across the world of media and academia, and I've assumed the leadership role today in India as the Dean of the Jindal School of Journalism and Communication. I have requested him to share some of his own experiences from his American higher education. He graduated from Yale University and Columbia University, so he has studied and worked in distinguished institutions, which I think can help us understand some of the challenges that we are facing, but hopefully to draw inspiration from institutions in other parts of the world, including in the United States. Thank you very much.
Where you are and standing where I am. And I'm here to reinforce the larger points that Raj has made. I am new to India, that a quality education is the single most important factor in assuring social mobility, social progress, and prosperity. That is true in the United States, and I think it is equally true in India. And just as a note, I've lived in California now for more or less 3 decades. Of the knowledge economy, the burgeoning of the knowledge economy. at Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley is a concept. It's not a geographical location as such. And Berkeley, which is across the bay from the Silicon Valley, sort of partakes in that. And to watch the growth of Silicon Valley and the growth of the computer industry, and largely as a result of what was going on at Stanford and Berkeley, is just quite extraordinary. And there's no reason that can't be duplicated and improved upon elsewhere. I think I'm going to just sit down, answer questions, listen to your questions. One of my earlier jobs also was I was a press secretary to the mayor of New York, so I'm familiar with press conferences too. Thanks.
One of the 8 existing private universities and 10 existing public universities which have been declared as institutions of eminence. As an effort to expand our programs, we have launched several new programs in recent times. The Journalism School and the BA in Journalism is one such program, but also in the forthcoming year, we have started the BA in Legal Studies in addition to our regular law school programs. We've also launched the BA in Social Science and Policy in our Public Policy School. We have launched the BA in Political Science in our School of International Affairs, and also a Master's in Economics program. So these are some of our newer programs. We of course have existing programs in the 8 different schools that we have, including in law, business, international affairs, public policy, liberal arts, journalism, architecture, and banking and finance.
I just want to say that Dr. Rajkumar can answer questions in Tamil.
Kanyakumari da, so inga da Madras la studied, so
these reform plans, is it for applicable to IITs also instead of eminence or how?
Yes, this is our suggestion for the country. This is applicable for all institutions. This whatever is in the plan is applicable for all institutions which are aspiring to become world class.
And then what is the role other than the government of India? Is it a national trust base?
So
what will be the role you'll be playing in this?
Yes. So I think the most important thing is the role universities have to take responsibility. Universities have to internally develop their vision and mission and recognize that quality education has become a priority. Resources so that they can extend their priorities on research, internationalization, and opportunities for students. Of course, government has a role to ensure that the regulatory environment is enabling and not too much of control and restrictions are imposed on universities so that they can function more autonomously. But a large part of the responsibility has to be taken by the universities, colleges, and institutions themselves.
You are not the facilitator between government and the
No. This is you see, the reason we thought we should do this is that we were created only 10 years ago. In 10 years, we have become one of the world's top 800 universities among the 30,000 universities. We are one of only 24 Indian universities ranked among the top 1,000. And we have also become an institution of eminence. So this was our own, responsibility to share with others that this is how we have done, and these are the things that you can consider doing if you think that you also want to aspire to become a world-class university. So you are absolutely right that many issues we might know in terms of the challenges, but what is, I think, 2 things have happened. One is that there is a larger expectation today of that high quality education, and that's also because of a demographic situation. 850 million people in India are now less than 35 years of age. The life expectancy is over 71. So there is a natural aspiration for young people to get high quality education. And I'm convinced that there is an important relationship between good education and jobs. The biggest challenge, and people don't talk about, is that one of the reasons of the job crisis that we are facing is not so much about the economy, which is of course the case, but a lot to do with the linkages between the jobs and the education and the qualifications obtained. As far as the speed in which is concerned, you are absolutely right. We are already on a catch-up situation. Today, China has nearly over 10 to 12 universities, the top 200. India has a couple of them. In the 100 also, China has nearly 5-6 universities. We don't have one also. So we are going to be playing catch up for a while. But I think the reason I'm optimistic about the future is the fact that at the heart of it, as a democracy, we are convinced about the importance universities can play towards strengthening our democratic institutions. And that's a very big difference between many other countries in India. Secondly, I'm also convinced that the young people of India, their aspirations will drive change within Indian universities. And that's already happening. The third, I think, is at a policy level, it is fair to say that the last decade in particular has seen significant impetus towards reforming Indian universities. Rankings is a very good example. A decade ago, even 5-6 years ago, universities would dismiss rankings. Today, not only rankings are accepted as a legitimate tool to assess the quality of institutions, the government of India has embraced rankings in a big way. The Gazette notification for the IOE has specifically said that the aspiration for Indian universities should be to become top 500 initially and then top 100 in the QS and Times Higher Education and Shanghai JTOG rankings. These things are driving changes across the country. IITs, public universities, central universities, NITs, ICERs, state public universities, private universities, they are all geared up to see it. More and more awareness is built around faculty. So I'm optimistic about the future, but I think media also has to play a big role. We all know higher education is a soft sort of interest. I have not seen serious articles written about how the relationship between the $5 trillion economy aspiration and the role of universities. I mean, look at the innovation sector, for example. Look at the type of ecosystem that we need to have for startup culture to develop. If you look at great things that have happened, whether it's a Facebook or a Twitter or all these, university campuses, played a very important role, and not only because of the fact that the education enhanced that creativity, but it's an ecosystem that provided opportunities for people to do things. We need to build that culture across institutions.
You said it is a $5 billion company. It is a part of education. Higher education is part of that. What is the percentage? How you just?
No, so what I mentioned. So this is our government's aspiration is by 2024. India should develop a $5 trillion economy. I think we are right now around $2.4 trillion economy, and around $2.4 trillion economy. So the biggest aspect of that economy is the human capital. We need people who are able to man that economy. We need individuals who are able to play a very significant role, be it working in the companies, corporations, business enterprises, or entrepreneurs, you name it. The people who are going to help build that economy are going to emerge out of university, not all of them, but a good number of them. So in some ways, and also the entire science and technology and innovation as elements of the higher education sector needs to be invested a lot more. So the point which I am underlining is that we need to focus a lot more on higher education institutions. We need to support them financially, but also otherwise, so that we can ultimately achieve this goal. So there are a few models. One is so we have to recognize that higher education, good quality higher education is expensive. Even if you want to build a laboratory, if you want to build state-of-the-art technological platforms, if you want to get an artificial intelligence lab, if you want to build infrastructure for sports or whatever, it's expensive. And of course, if you want to have a higher bright faculty, it is expensive as well. So first we have to understand that education is expensive, but the long-term investment and return on investment to higher education is the state of social and economic development of a society, and that's immeasurable in that sense, priceless, but also one can even put a value figure because it's so long term. The question is, who pays for it? That's the most important question, right? It's expensive and it needs to be invested. different societies have taken different pathways. India, historically, we have seen higher education as a public good, and we have had largely public universities. Since the 1980s, we have developed private universities, but unfortunately, most of them had a more for-profit type model. Recent times, we have seen not-for-profit type universities emerging, few of them, and we see ourselves to be part of that. And the challenge remains that even when you have those institutions, there is a need for significant capital coming into the education system. Now, if you look at the great private universities around the world, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and other places, including MIT, a good part of the resources also come from alumni funding and donations and other things. In India, we don't have that culture as much, not just in private, but also in public universities. So we need to develop a better and a more realistic understanding of the costs relating to higher education and the financing models surrounding higher education. And that financing model has to be more nuanced, for example. Like, there's something to be said about the fact that many of us ended up paying much lesser when we went to university than what we paid in high school. And that's just not right. And I think this has nothing to do with making higher education free for a lot of people who simply can't afford. So we are getting our sort of financing model not right, and that has resulted in a lack of proper expectations when it comes to fees and how do you ensure that. Of course, I do very strongly believe that we need to create endowments, we need to create philanthropy in higher education, we need to root through the corporate social responsibility 2% contribution of companies into higher education sector. A few weeks ago, the finance minister announced that the CSR funding, the 2% CSR funding, is going to be made available for, in fact, companies can invest on incubators as well as research and innovation within universities. My only quibble with that announcement was that it ended up being limited to only public universities and private universities were ruled out. I think we need to go beyond this kind of distinction between public and private, particularly with 70% of our education sector in the private sector. Our country, to build a $5 trillion economy, is going to depend upon our ability to invest in higher education and to focus on building world-class universities. The human capacity, the human capability, and also the human development capacities that universities have will be significantly enhanced if we can improve quality and also focus on research and knowledge creation in our universities. The fact that we have established institutions of eminence which have been identified as part of the Government of India's process is a first step in the right direction, but we need to move beyond that. We need to now focus on how do we build world-class universities, how do we create research ecosystem, how do we invest in higher education. So one of the ways by which we have been able to create world-class universities around the world is to invest in higher education and significantly enhancing the GDP investment relating to higher education. The benefit of that is we can have an economy and institutions that can shape the economy through better human capital emerging out of our universities. நம்ம நாட்டில் ஒரு பண்ணுறதுக்கு ஒரு ஆஸ்பிரேஷன் இருக்குது. இந்த $5 trillion எக்கானமி பண்ணுறதுக்கு ரொம்ப முக்கியமான ஒரு விஷயம் என்னன்னா, நம்ம யூனிவர்சிட்டியோட ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் இம்ப்ரூவ் பண்ணணும். நம்ம நாட்டில் ஒரு 1000 யூனிவர்சிட்டிஸ் இருக்குது, ஒரு 40,000 காலேஜஸ் இருக்குது. பட் நீங்கள் குவாலிட்டி எஜுகேஷன் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா அந்த ஆஸ்பிரேஷன் இன்னும் நம்ம ஃபுல்ஃபில் பண்ணல. இன்டர்நேஷ்னல் ரேங்கிங்ஸில் கூட டாப் 100 யூனிவர்சிட்டியில் இந்தியாவிலேருந்து ஒரு யூனிவர்சிட்டி கூட இல்லை. ஈவன் இந்த டாப் 200ல கூட ரொம்ப கம்மியான யூனிவர்சிட்டிஸ் தான் இருக்குது. ஸோ நம்ம குவாலிட்டி எஜுகேஷனும் ரிசர்ச் ஃபோக்கஸ் எஜுகேஷனும் இன்னோவேஷனும் நம்ம யூனிவர்சிட்டியில் கொண்டு வரும்போது தான் நம்ம $5 trillion எக்கானமிக்கு டெவலப் பண்ண முடியும். அதுக்கப்புறம் நம்ம ஃபேக்கல்ட்டி ரிசர்ச்சை ஃபோக்கஸ் பண்ணணும். எவ்வளோ ஜாஸ்தியாக நம்ம ஃபேக்கல்ட்டி ரிசர்ச் ஃபோக்கஸ் பண்ண முடியுமோ அது நம்மளோட சோஷியல் இன்னோவேஷனுக்கும் ஆண்டர்ப்ரினர்ஷிப்புக்கும் அப்புறம் ஸ்டார்ட் அப் கல்ச்சருக்கும் ரொம்ப யூஸ்ஃபுல்லாக இருக்கும். ஸோ இன் அ வே த மோஸ்ட் இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் திங் நம்ம நாட்டை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் நம்ம பார்க்க வேண்டியதுன்னா, நம்ம $5 trillion எக்கானமியோட ஆஸ்பிரேஷனுக்கு வேர்ல்ட் கிளாஸ் யூனிவர்சிட்டிஸும் ஹையர் எஜுகேஷன் ஆப்பர்ச்சுனிட்டிஸும் ஹையர் எஜுகேஷன் செக்டரோட இன்வெஸ்ட்மெண்ட்டும் ரோல் ரொம்ப இம்பார்ட்டன்ட்.